Shohei Ohtani has faced 100-mile-per-hour fastballs. He has stood in against the nastiest sliders in the sport. He has dug in against pitchers who have spent their entire careers studying how to make him uncomfortable, how to exploit every weakness, how to find the one pitch that breaks through that legendary composure. He has handled all of it. Every single time. Without complaint. Without drama. Without ever once asking the league to intervene on his behalf. Until now. What happened at Dodger Stadium involving a Giants outfielder and a baseball bat was not a baseball play. It was not a hard slide or a tight pitch or a collision at the wall that could be explained away as the physical consequence of competitive sport. It was something more deliberate than that. More targeted. More personal. And when Shohei Ohtani, a man who has never once in his professional career made a public complaint about how he is being treated, sat down and filed an official complaint with Major League Baseball, the entire sport stopped and paid attention. Because if it was serious enough to make Ohtani speak up, it was serious enough to change everything. What exactly happened on that field? Who is the Giants outfielder at the center of this? What did the incident look like up close? And what does Ohtani's formal complaint mean for both the player involved and for the league that now has to respond? Every detail. Right now. There is a moment in every game where the energy shifts. Where something that looks like baseball stops being baseball and becomes something else entirely. Players feel it before they can articulate it. Coaches feel it from the dugout. The crowd feels it. That sudden stillness that descends when the 56,000 people inside a stadium simultaneously recognize that something has gone wrong. That moment arrived without warning. The Giants outfielder, a player who had been involved in the brewing tension between these two franchises throughout the series, was moving through a moment of transition on the field. Not an at-bat. Not a defensive play. A moment between the action, the kind of moment that happens dozens of times in every game and almost always means nothing. Except this time it meant everything. What witnesses inside Dodger Stadium described in the immediate aftermath was a deliberate, directed movement with a baseball bat that was aimed squarely at Shohei Ohtani. Not a wild swing in the frustration of a strikeout. Not an accidental follow-through that caught someone in the wrong place at the wrong time. A movement that those who saw it up close, players, coaches, umpires, stadium personnel, described uniformly as intentional. Ohtani's reaction was immediate and visible. He stepped back. He held his position. He did not retaliate. He did not escalate. He did not do any of the things that a player in that moment might be forgiven for doing. He looked at the umpire. He looked at the Giants outfielder. And then, with a composure that should not have been possible given what had just happened, he stepped away from the situation entirely. Those who were watching from the dugout described the next 60 seconds as some of the most tense they had ever experienced on a baseball field. Players on both sides had seen what happened. Coaches on both sides had seen it. The umpires were in the middle of a rapid, urgent conversation that had nothing to do with balls and strikes. And Ohtani, standing at a distance now, processing what had just been done to him, was already making a decision. Understanding this incident requires understanding the player involved. The Giants outfielder in question is not a marginal roster piece. He is not a player without history, without standing, without the kind of professional reputation that makes this moment so difficult to reconcile. He is an established presence in that lineup, a player with years of major league experience, a player who has competed at the highest level and who understands better than most what the unwritten rules of this sport demand. Which makes what he did more difficult to explain. Not less. Veterans do not accidentally make deliberate movements toward opposing players with baseball bats. That is not how the sport works. The physical awareness required to play at this level, the body control, the spatial understanding, the constant calibration of distance and movement, means that what happened in that moment was not accidental. It could not have been. Those close to the Giants organization have struggled to offer any coherent explanation for the incident. The player himself has not addressed it publicly in any meaningful way. His initial response, according to those who were present, was a dismissive posture, the body language of someone who was aware of what he had done and was calculating whether it required acknowledgement. It required more than acknowledgement. It required accountability. And when the Dodgers staff made their way to Ohtani in the minutes following the incident, checking on him, asking questions, trying to understand the full picture of what had happened and what response was appropriate, Ohtani told them clearly what he wanted to do. He wanted to file a complaint. Officially. With the league. On the record. Let's be precise about what this means. In the entire history of Shohei Ohtani's professional career, spanning years in Japan's NPB and now multiple seasons as the most watched player in American baseball, he has never filed a formal complaint with Major League Baseball. Not once. Not about brushback pitches that came dangerously close. Not about the psychological tactics that opponents have used to try to disrupt his rhythm. Not about any of the various provocations that come with being the most targeted player in the sport. He has absorbed all of it. Privately. Quietly. Without ever asking the institution of baseball to step in and protect him. The decision to file this complaint was not made impulsively. Those who know how Ohtani operates understand that nothing he does publicly is impulsive. Every action is considered. Every statement, and most of his statements are made through performance rather than words, is the product of a deliberate internal process that most people never get to observe. When Ohtani decided to go on the record with MLB, he was doing something that went beyond the personal grievance of a player who had been targeted. He was making a statement about standards. About what is and is not acceptable when you share a baseball field with another human being. About the responsibility that the league has to protect its players, all of its players, from conduct that crosses the line from aggressive competition into something genuinely dangerous. The complaint was filed through the proper channels, with documentation that included witness accounts from multiple people who had been in a position to observe exactly what happened. It was thorough. It was organized. It was, by all accounts, the kind of complaint that the league takes seriously precisely because of how seriously it was prepared. MLB's office acknowledged receipt immediately. A formal review was launched within hours. Major League Baseball does not move quickly on most things. The machinery of the sport, its governance, its disciplinary processes, its communication with teams and players, operates on a timeline that can frustrate everyone involved, particularly in moments that demand urgency. This was not one of those moments. The league's response to Ohtani's complaint came faster than almost anyone expected. Within 24 hours of the formal filing, MLB had completed an initial review of available footage, gathered statements from the umpiring crew that had been on the field, and issued a preliminary finding that the conduct described in the complaint warranted serious disciplinary consideration. The Giants outfielder was informed that he was facing a suspension. The length and specific terms were subject to the standard appeals process, but the direction was clear. What had happened at Dodger Stadium had been reviewed, evaluated, and classified as conduct unbecoming of a professional baseball player. The Giants organization, for its part, was placed in an impossible position. Publicly defending the player's behavior was not a viable option, the footage was too clear, the witnesses too numerous, the league's preliminary findings too definitive. But abandoning a player to face consequences alone carries its own organizational costs, its own message to every person inside that clubhouse about how the franchise treats its people when situations become difficult. Their public statement walked the line between accountability and support, the kind of carefully worded organizational response that says very little while appearing to say a great deal. It satisfied nobody. Which was, perhaps, the only honest outcome available. Inside both locker rooms, the atmosphere was charged. Giants players were quiet, the particular quiet of people processing something they cannot fully defend. Dodgers players rallied around Ohtani with a visible solidarity that spoke to how seriously they took what had happened to their teammate. And Ohtani himself moved through the day with his characteristic stillness. He spoke briefly with reporters, not about the incident specifically, but about standards, about respect, about the importance of protecting the integrity of competition. His words were measured. His message was clear. This was not acceptable. And he was not going to pretend otherwise. Here is what makes Shohei Ohtani's decision to file this complaint so significant, so much more significant than the incident itself. He did not have to do it. He could have absorbed it. He could have filed it away the way he files away every difficult at-bat, internally, privately, converted into fuel for the next performance. He could have allowed the moment to disappear into the noise of a long baseball season, mentioned to nobody outside his inner circle, resolved through the quiet channels that handle most professional conflicts without public acknowledgement. He chose not to. He chose to use his voice, the voice that he almost never raises, the voice that the entire sport leans forward to hear precisely because it speaks so rarely, to draw a line. To say, this happened, it was wrong, and the people responsible for the standards of this game need to know about it and act on it. That decision took more courage than any home run. More strength than any at-bat in a pennant race. Because it required Ohtani to step outside the protective silence that has defined his public persona and become, for a moment, not just the greatest player in baseball but a person who was willing to be vulnerable enough to say, "What was done to me was not okay." The Giants outfielder will face his suspension. The league will process its findings. The documentation will be filed and reviewed and eventually become part of the official record of this season. But what will last longer than any of that, what will be remembered when the suspensions are served and the games have been played and the standings have been decided, is the image of Shohei Ohtani choosing accountability over silence. Choosing to speak. Not because he needed the protection, but because the standard needed defending. And nobody in baseball was better positioned to defend it.